Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest installment of our UXDX Online series. I hope you're really excited for our two sessions that we have this evening. I'm really looking forward to diving deep into some of the more topics of ethereal UX or inclusive and accessible UX research. So just before we jump into the main topics of the night, I want to give a very quick introduction to what it is that we're doing at UXDX to give you a bit of an idea of why we're running these sessions, and hopefully that'll show what you can get out of doing or attending here. So at UXDX, our mission is to help companies shift from building software in projects to empowered autonomous product teams. And the reason that's our mission is because we believe it's more effective, more efficient, and more sustainable way of building products in a high change environment. And the reason I put in that last caveat is because there is no one size fits all. This was always my bugbear when I was working in companies that kind of were rigid on a waterfall process. It doesn't make sense in all contexts. There are some instances where it works and some where it doesn't. And at a very high level, what I like to think of is in a low change environment, it makes sense to have a waterfall structure because things aren't changing. So build a team, put them on something, change whatever needs to be changed, and then move them over somewhere else where they need to focus next. And the benefit of that is that you're able to efficiently move people around. The negative of that is when you get into a high change environment, they're constantly, like I've been in companies with 80 to 100 projects working in parallel. So at that point, it becomes more efficient to have dedicated teams where they can learn about the customer, learn about the business needs in a particular part of the system, so they can better develop solutions for that. Plus, they take ownership of the code, so there's less chance of tech debt bringing down your system. So that's easy to say, hard to do. And what we try to do at UXDX is help people on the journey of changing towards that. And one of the big challenges is that in a project, you have, you have specialists. So on one project I was on, I counted 20 different specialists, from architects to project managers to front-end interaction designers, UX researchers, front-end developers, back-end developers, QA, data engineers, etc., all the operations people. So there was a lot of people that went from start to finish. But if you have a product team that has, let's say, 8 as a maximum number of people, there's a challenge there. That how do you get a full gamut of those 20 specialists with 8 people? And that's where we introduce the concept of T-shaped, or some people call it pie-shaped skills, where you have a deep speciality in one area. So maybe you are that front-end developer, or maybe you're that UX researcher. But it's equally important to have a cross-functional understanding of what's happening across the rest of the product development process. And that's that kind of T-shaped skill. And that's what we're trying to do here at UXDX by inviting product, UX, design, and dev to all of our sessions, so that you can start building up that T-shaped skill, so that when you're on a product team, you can start helping out in other areas as needed. The other thing that we always do is we ask our speakers to try share examples, because theory is great. And I fall into this trap a lot of just talking about the theory of something. But the devil is in the detail of when you try to implement this. So it's always good to try and, or we ask our speakers to share what were the challenges of implementing this, share a real case study, and help people with the pitfalls that they might fall into. And with that, it's really important to ask any questions that you have. So our speakers are going to be sharing their insights and what they've learned, but there's always, I guess, gaps or areas where you'd like to learn a bit more. So please do feel free to ask, and the speakers will be more than happy to answer them. If we run out of time, which unfortunately sometimes happens, we do have the UXDX community Slack group, which has an Ask the Speakers channel. And in there, we can ask any questions that we don't have time to cover in the session today. But that's enough about me and the introduction. So I'd like to hand over now to Binoodha, who will be talking about inclusive and accessible UX research. So welcome, Binoodha.
Thank you. Just gonna try and share my screen. Okay, I can't see you all, so let me know if the slides are not changing. So
it's just a black screen at the moment, but I'll...
Do you see it now?
I can see your cursor, but I can't see any slides.
Let me try that one again.
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
So, over to you. Thank you very much.
All right, so hello everyone. My name is Binoodha and I work as a senior UX researcher with Hammer and Tong. You can find more about them in my bio. Today, I want to open a conversation about how we can embrace inclusivity and accessibility in user research. Uh, but before we discuss inclusivity and accessibility, I want to take you all through my journey to being interested in this subject. My family migrated from India to Oman in the 1900s. I was born and raised in Oman, where I was fortunate to learn more about the Omani culture, but I always want to travel back to India and learn more about my roots. I went back to India to pursue my higher education, where I learned I was categorized as an NRI, which is a non resident Indian. And lo behold, I realized how the community, environment, and circumstances I grew up in made me so different from the people who I always related to. A few years later, I moved to Canada, a country that I now call home. Here, I work with companies like Hammer and Tong and TrustFlight, where I advocate for UX and explore qualitative research methods to help define opportunities to build products that deliver value to users. So, all my life, I try to put myself into boxes. But if my experience has taught me anything, it would be that people never fit in one box. People have multiple cultural backgrounds, experiences, abilities, or ethnicities that inform the way they behave or react to things. We misdesign things if we try to fit people into one single box. So, as UX researchers, our goal is to solve real problems for real people. But who are these real people? Are these people part of our research process? Do we design with them or we design for them? So, I want to touch upon some considerations for involving these people in our research, ideation, testing, and development process. So, think of users you want to test with, and then think about where you'll find these users. I've often heard people complain about how hard it is to find diverse users. Um, one of the, so, One of the things that worked for me in my experience has been reaching out to organizations or communities to help you recruit these users. These organizations will help you with the consent forms and also would have access to any of the assistive technology or devices that you could even rent out for your test. Um, it's also useful to review your screener to keep questions about genders open ended so participants can answer in their own words. When open ended isn't possible, include expanded choices for genders in your screeners. In the past, we have also used census data from Statistics Canada to understand the demographics and make sure we are recruiting users from diverse ethnicities. Prioritize getting a mix of participants across ages, 18 plus, unless your study objectives focus on a specific age group. And as I always say, don't underestimate your tech savvy mother. Um, Also, it's always interesting to see how different people use your products. Ask about any necessary accommodation, translators, or assistive technology that would be required for these users to be part of your research. And finally, always rethink the standards of recruiting that might not make sense given the current landscape of your users, especially as an example, during COVID-19, we had to keep in mind that people were going through changes in their lives and sometimes we had to accommodate research remotely, or we had to factor in the stress that the users were facing in their real life, and how that would affect our test insights. So here's me holding an umbrella, carrying a phone, to recording the interview and guiding the interview for Seedlink project. The Seedlink project is an AR art installation projected at the center of Lafargue Lake in British Columbia. We decided to conduct a field research for this project because it was important for us to understand how the users interacted with the installation at the location. We did have some demographic information about the users, that people that visited the lake, and this was a diverse group of people consisting of different age, ethnicity, and exposure to augmented reality. Obviously, we did our recce on a sunny day, so we didn't factor the weather. One of our participants was a lovely 50-year-old woman who visited the lake very often. Some of the consideration we focused on were to allow her to walk her usual route. Since we were using our own device for the test, we allowed her to explore the app before we started our test. We also had a brief introductory conversation where we asked her about the other apps that she used currently and tried to make her feel comfortable with using an AR application. It was also raining heavily, so we decided to move our briefing indoors and limit the time outside to the actual test. So we also briefed her that we could end the test anytime that she felt uncomfortable or tired or wanted to simply take a break. And that brings me to the next important consideration, the test environment. So, testing in an uncontrolled environment requires us to plan ahead for any risk mitigation. As always, it's always best to test the product in the environment, as the location of your research plays an important role in determining the type of data you're able to gather and whether you're able to meet the objectives of the research. When testing with people with accessibility concerns, testing in their native environment will also get a better understanding of the real world accessibility requirements your participants has beyond the screen of your product. So keeping your research methods flexible is also another important consideration. Inform the task beforehand if conducting something like participatory design or a pre-session homework, where participants are required to write or draw, explain what the activity will entail beforehand, and ask if they will need assistance to participate. You could also use oral instead of written communication if your designs are not coded yet. You could narrate the user interface to someone who has issues with vision. This will also be helpful to learn how you can incorporate voice sounds into your interface. In the past, we have also used interpreters, so you might require to hire a sign language interpreter to sign into your interviews. You could also work with them prior to your research to refine and define those questions. You can also leverage the chat features in the video conferences to conduct these tests. If you're using survey, it might also be useful to think of other ways to conduct the surveys using probably sign language or voice to ask your questions. You could also include visuals with instructions where appropriate, provide visuals rather than in addition to visuals in addition to written instructions. This will make it easier for participants with dyslexia and learning difficulties to follow. You can also allow participants to complete the scenario as themselves. It's very common in UX, in research, where we ask the participants to imagine that they are this fictional person in this scenario, and these abstract concepts can be difficult for people with certain cognitive impairments to grasp. So it's preferable to allow them to complete tasks and scenarios as themselves. An interesting conversation I had with another UX researcher recently was about how we name our personas and how we can make our personas more inclusive and more relatable for our target audience. Some other considerations we could include are clearing your room or video call background of distractions, um, allowing your users extra time. So I recently learned about new terminology, not probably new for me, but it was called crib time, which is a term that refers to the ways in which people with disabilities experience time as opposed to standard time. Um, for instance, a person who relies on the assistance of a caretaker might experience time according to the availability or schedule of that caretaker, or a person who has unpredictable fatigue that requires them to rest might orient their time around these needs. We can also be mindful of our body language. Make sure your body language is not intimidating or making these users uncomfortable. Um, and we could also factor in additional time to allow breaks, frequent breaks during the test for users that might experience fatigue. Um, we can also see if they need accessibility requirements to have physical access to the buildings, or are you able to move the session to remote to accommodate these users? Uh, Jargon like it's a ballpark figure or a piece of cake might not be known to a non-native English speaker. So we want to review our questions to make sure that they provide clarity, as well as pause and allow the users to ask questions if they did not understand the instructions or your question. Some survey question types like heat maps or drag and drop cannot are not accessible for screen reader users, so we can look at alternate ways to ask or frame those questions. In the past, I've also had some users express that they would be comfortable if they are able to write down the answers before they could speak them out loud. Um, Accessibility and inclusivity research can take longer to run, so give yourself extra time before research, during research, and after research. This would mean longer recruitment time, longer breaks during research, longer test times, and longer analysis time if you need support to translate or analyze insights in various formats. Sometimes it might take longer to set up your test space to support assistive technology or prepare for the next participant as well. Maybe you don't have the budget to hire more researchers, but we can always look around our organization and see who else can help. Consider how we can partner with our colleagues in an intentional way that makes them feel included. Maybe this looks like sending out a request for collaboration that explains the study and how you're looking for more perspectives to ensure you get it right. And finally, what we should really strive is to move our accessibility and inclusivity considerations from our nice to have list to our must haves. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. I really enjoyed that. There's some really good tangible insights from that. The one I took away was you gave a story about relatable personas. Could you go into a bit more detail about what the outcome of that was, and how did you restructure your personas to be able to become more relatable?
Um, yeah, sure. I think like there's a lot of ways you can do it, but the simplest way is how do you name these personas? Often we tend to lean towards names that would be more relatable to would have like more Western names. But if you could have more names that are probably relatable or more inclusive, even if you're not using actual photographs or using characters, or if you're looking at lifestyle, try and expand that and see how that can be inclusive as well in your personas.
Great. Um, One of the things that I've always kind of looked at, and maybe you could give some pointers, is how do you go and find these people, kind of more diverse people in different needs to conduct your research with? Like, where do you go to recruit the relevant
Um,
participants?
Yeah, so there are a lot of organizations or communities that all these people are part of. So you can reach out to these communities, and they're more than willing to connect you with people from these communities who can be your point of contact and connect you to more people within the community. That's one of the ways that I have tried to approach this earlier. Or there are also online forums that are for these people. So you can try and get in touch with these users through those forums and ask them for help, and be very clear about what you're trying to do with this research, and try and even offer any compensation for their time and effort that they would be willing to contribute towards your project.
Great. And is there any kind of centralized place where people can go to find these, or is it a case of just go and have a look yourself, and because you can
Um,
search for depending on what you're looking for?
Yeah, so it's a broad, like depends on your project goals, who these users that you're trying to look for. So if you're in the past that I was working with people on the autism spectrum, so I try to get in touch with Autism Speaks, another community in Canada that I could who they would connect me with other researchers or other people that I can talk to and learn more about. And they also help me understand what kind of language or how I could be inclusive or considerate in the language that I use while conducting this research as well.
Great. And just saw there's a question from Louise. Um, she was saying that she's often constrained on time and budget. Like it's always she gets pushback saying, um, yeah, we need to move faster. So how do you propose, because you gave a good point there during it, that you might need to reevaluate your timelines. What advice do you give to people who are being squeezed to squeeze their timelines that they need to expand?
Yeah, so I think it's often like prioritization. So it's we often put accessibility or uh, specifically talking about accessibility as the last thing that we come back to once we have developed our products or looked at it, and we think of it as edge case scenarios. So what has helped us is having those considerations when you start the design process or research process. Again, if we build the foundation for that, it's easier for us to come back and include those accessibility considerations. So when you're in terms of research, we have these research plans, have these users. We conduct our research on the timeline as per the users, but how we incorporate those insights into our pipeline is probably at a later stage, but it's still being considered while we're building those wireframes or prototypes for design.
And do you have any particular ways that you try? So I agree with what you're saying there. It's incredibly important to factor it in, and it does often get left as a kind of seen as an edge case. So if you were like, I guess, is there any tangible advice that you would give to Louise or other people who are watching who say, well, I try that, but I'm getting pushback that we need to move quicker. So to try convince people that there is value in this.
One, if your products are accessible, your the amount of people that can use your product is expanding, right? So you have more users who are able to use your products. If it's inclusive, there are more users that are going to be attracted to this product. Um, Often in like a lot of products that we build in like regulated environments, these are a must to have accessibility consideration. You can be there can be legal suits that we file against you if you don't follow these considerations. So it's easier to have these considerations right at the beginning than having to go back and build those. And the last is educating people about accessibility and inclusivity, because not everyone is aware about how does this design look to someone who has color blindness, or how does this test confuse someone who has learning disabilities. So education goes a long way, and that helps us push or get buy-ins from stakeholders as well.
Brilliant. No, I think that's really good advice, and hopefully people out there can use that as a way, like you can increase your market share. The regulatory one, I used to work in airline industry, and that was a big one because they can get penalized quite heavily if their sites are not accessible. And a friend of mine, Brian Dalton, he gave a talk about trying to book a seat as a blind person in a cinema, and it was impossible, because he got to the point where it was like the red seats are booked, and he was like, well, I have no idea which ones are red.
Yeah.
So yeah, kind of some of the challenges really is eye-opening when you see somebody using a screen reader, and it shows you the challenges that they face while trying to navigate. So I think that almost brings us to time. So thank you very much, Binoodha, and thank you for sharing your insights with everybody.
Yeah, thank you for having me here.
Excellent. So up next, we are going to introduce Britt, who will be talking about ethereal UX. And if you want to learn more about what he means by ethereal UX, then you're going to have to join us for the next session. So I'd like to welcome Britt to the stage. Welcome, Britt.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so let me share your screen, and I'll wait for you to present it, and then I'll put it up again.
Hold on a sec. This will be
Okay. Looking good. So I'll hand it over to you, Britt. Thank you.
Okay, so this is Britt and Ethereal UX. So this is kind of emerged out of my heart, but a little bit. So here's the little intro. I want to talk and deliverable, those things fast, and then what the ether actual end up the talk. My name is Britt. CXP. If you don't know what that is experiences and design director at an agency called Valtech here in San Diego, California. We do which is a lot of products and retail. And just a lot of interactive things. We get into AR, VR, and we do branch things. This is kind of get my chops going. Get into ethereal UX, right?
So, sorry, Britt, to jump in. The sound is cutting in and out for some reason.
Okay.
I'm not sure why. I'm only getting every second word that you're saying.
Okay. How's it feel?
Uh, can you talk again? I think it might have gotten better.
Yeah, check 1, 2.
No, maybe
No?
if you could try refresh the screen, maybe that might,
Okay.
or sorry, refresh the whole browser. I don't know whether exiting and re-entering might improve it. Apologies for the interruption. So yeah, in our presentation, Britt's sound was perfect, but this always happens on the day, which is frustrating. But Britt has rejoined us, so hopefully that's better sound now. If you can speak.
How is it? Our same.
It's the same, unfortunately.
Hold on.
Is it your headset potentially? I'm not hearing anything at all now. And as I was just explaining to the audience, this was working perfectly before you started presenting, so which is always Murphy's Law of presentations. Don't know if you need to go into settings and change your audio settings. There's a settings, or if you click the letter S, it'll open up the settings panel. Apologies for this. As we said, during our pre-practice, Britt's microphone was working perfectly. So it's always Murphy's Law of presentations.
How is it now? You hear me?
It's still, unfortunately, it's cutting in and out. If you go to settings, does it give you any options there in audio?
No, it just let me see.
I can see your mouth moving, but I can't hear anything.
How about now? Wow, it shows.
Yeah, I can hear you, but I'm seeing quite a delay from your mouth to the sound.
Oh.
So what we'll do, we'll give it another 2 minutes to try to do some tech support for this. Apologies for those people watching. But what we will do is, if we don't get this resolved in the next 2 or 3 minutes, what we'll ask is if Britt could record his talk, and we will publish and send that out to everybody who's registered for the event.
Nothing.
It's quite a delay now from. Maybe if you try refresh the browser one more time.
Same?
No, that's perfect now.
Oh, sweet. Okay, let's try to share. We good?
Yes, okay. Apologies for the interruption and the technical difficulties. But once again, I'll hand over to you, Britt. Thank you very much.
All right, cool. So let's get into it. Ethereal UX. Let's start out with some definitions. So user experience encompasses all aspects of the end user's interaction with a company, its services, and its products. What's ethereal? The first part of that word, ether, it means upper air, bright, pure air or the sky, and then y'all. I think I should have spelled that better. It's of or related to. So when we say ethereal, we're talking about something related to this upper air, the sky, things that seem kind of invisible to the naked eye. And when we combine them, what we're talking about in general is that ethereal UX is the practice of discovering the hidden layers of meaning that live above, below, and around the tactics of best UX practices. So let's get into what that means. So tools, schmools. And I like to look at tools. I like to talk about tools because a lot of times designers get so hung up in tools, and, does anybody, well, I guess there's no like talk back, but this green one down here. So we have Figma, we have XD, we have Sketch, they're kind of common. This green one down here is something called OmniGraffle. You might remember that. But as tools go, tools kind of come and go, right? So I say tools, schmools. It's not really about our tools. And when we talk about tools, if we have a hammer in our hand, we know it could do a few things. We could hit a nail. We're not supposed to hit screws with it. We could, tear down a wall. Hammer does a few things, but we know how to use it. It's pretty simple. You get a hammer in your hand and you hammer things. So all that to say, we need to stay tool agnostic when we design. And when we talk about ethereal design, we want to really get away from tools. Hold on a sec. Oh my gosh. So when we get stuck on tools, it's easy to miss the point. So using our tools should be second nature. And when I was a very green designer, I had a executive creative director that was kind of pushing me. He was really kind of, I didn't even really understand what his advice was, what his notes were. But at the end of the day, what it came down to is he was telling me that I needed to get really fast at my tools so that they would become second nature. So that when I used, XD or whatever it was, back then it was probably Photoshop or something. But when I use this tool, it's just kind of in the back of my mind. I don't need to think about it. I don't need to worry about it. I know how to do that. And, a lot of times we notice when tools come out, they're very similar. There's different shortcuts. Obviously, I've been on Adobe for years, so I know all their shortcuts. I wish that everybody had those shortcuts just because I know them. But we need to have these tools in the back of our mind, because when it comes to design, and especially when it comes to thinking about ethereal design, this phrase, this quote from Ellen Lupton really comes to mind. And she said, think more, design less. And so, when we have tools in our way, we cannot, think too long, because we need to go and we need to work. And we know that, like, if just using, Figma is a hard task for us, we don't really know how to use it that well, or, we're gonna have to go do a tutorial on X. This is gonna get in the way of our design thinking. It's gonna get in the way of actually being able to spend time in what we're gonna find out is the ether of design, which is not actually the gray boxes and the journeys and things like that. It's where all of the actual design inspiration comes from. So think more, design less. Keep that in your mind. Write it down. Think about it. A lot of this, and then just to kind of take a step back, a lot of the things that I'm saying are very ethereal themselves. They're very philosophical. I will have some examples down in some slides, so it's not just going to be a bunch of fluff. But, this is something that I really want to encourage anyone in, the creative industry, in general, agency, anything, the ability to transcend what we're doing with actual physical design is the ability for us as people to kind of transcend states of work. And so the higher level thinking we can do, just to be frank, the more money you're going to be able to make, the more connections you're going to have, the more, exciting work you're going to get in your hands. So think more, design less. Keep that in your mind and think about it over the years. what does it mean, allow it to kind of evolve. So just like tools schmools, I want to say deliverables, schmeliverables. It's really hard to say, and I probably shouldn't have done that, but I did. So, we see over here, we have some wireframes, we have some journeys, we have some personas, just like tools, deliverables, we can clog our mind with deliverables and what they are. And a lot of times, in school and things, we learn how to do a certain deliverable, but then when we get into the real world, what's it for? And I can honestly say this. I was a UX designer for about 4.5 years, and I never did one persona at an agency. So not to say that they're not valuable, not to say that we don't use them, not to say that we don't use them or do them, but some things that we learn in school, we don't take them over. And so what about deliverables then? So deliverables should not be included in the SOW, the statement of work, that's signed, if one, they don't add value in client management. And this is going to be a big kind of thing about what I'm talking about, how we're dealing with our clients. But client management is huge, and it's not just trying to black box a client, trying to show a little work here and a little over there and trying to stretch things out. It's not just that, but really when we get into design, and when we start talking to stakeholders that might be close to the C-suite, or a lot of VP this and that's, they're not that familiar with design or how it works. So a lot of times when we're talking to our stakeholders, one of the biggest things we're doing is, one, managing their expectations, because they might have hired us and thought, I'm going to have this polished website done in like a week, but it's really this extended process with a lot of different teams and a lot of different people. And so when we deliver things, we need to make sure that they actually, one, add value to the client and what they're trying to do. So just one example, a lot of times when we're dealing with a client, we're not dealing with the CEO of a company. We're dealing with someone that company hired to create their website to work with us, or to create this app, or whatever it is that we're doing. They're going to have to go show their bosses. So at the end of the day, a lot of times we're doing deliverables that actually help them prove and show our work to people that are higher up than them, that are actually signing off on budgets and things like that. So one, if the deliverable doesn't add value to the client in client management, then we don't include it, or we don't do it. It's just fluff. And then the second one is huge. If they don't support the design build effort, we don't include it. And that means, why does a visual designer that's up at the next stop need a persona? They might not, but the stakeholder would. They want to know who their customer is, and those personas are coming from a bunch of work that we just did in discovery. So deliverables, I don't want anybody to get hung up in what a deliverable should be. They have to apply specifically to the project. And kind of like tools, we should know how to produce all of our deliverables. It's like table stakes. Tools and deliverables are our table stakes. They shouldn't hang us up. Knowing how to create, a user journey should exist in our brain easily to pull out. Now, one thing before I move on, it's not saying that doing these deliverables is always super easy, right? Like, there's tons of, things we need to pull through. We're talking to stakeholders, we're talking to customers, we're looking at websites, we're looking at apps, we're looking at competition, we're looking at, we're doing all kinds of things to figure out, how to build X. So I'm not trying to say that deliverables are always easy, but we should know what they are, and they shouldn't, we shouldn't be freaked out by the fact that I need to make, a persona, or I need to do some wires. It's just something that we have to do. And if we're thinking about the project as a whole, we're going to get really good at being able to bust those things out, especially when we know our tools really well. So all of these things, from tools to deliverables, they kind of stay in the background. They're not our main focus. They're not something that we obsess over or worry about. So if you do, this is a call. Get good at your tools and understand how to create deliverables, so that you can move past that into this realm of thinking. So let's go into the ether. What is it? Well, the ability to discover ethereal UX is the art of seeing into the hearts and minds of people. This is where the passion lies, and this is where the answers are found. And I love that, I'm following a talk about accessibility and, how to actually research and include that, because a lot of this comes from this idea of, we are thinking about people and the way that they think, the way that they live, the way they interact. And this is really where the passion lies, and the answers to all of the problems. A lot of times I see on, designers or UX designers' portfolio or their profile that I'm a problem solver. Like we love saying that I'm a problem solver, but we cannot solve these big complex problems if we cannot capture the passion that's behind why we're designing things in the first place. So the vision, the mission, and the passion is found inside the heart of the stakeholder. And this is like I made this slide and the next one really black and white, are kind of very contrasted, so we can actually think about this. The vision, the mission, the passion is found in the heart of the stakeholder. So think about this. A lot of times we have this view of a stakeholder as kind of like our arch nemesis, because, in UX, we're out here fighting for the lives of people, our users, and we're trying to, we're ombudsman for the user. We're fighting the good fight. And we're fighting against these dang stakeholders that are, trying to harsh our gig and like make us throw this little feature in there that has nothing to do with. And there's some of that, right? There is always this tug of war back and forth. But the vision and the mission and the passion for the product is found in the heart of the stakeholder. I say it again, because they're the ones that have the product that they're trying to get people to buy. They're the ones that have the product that helps people's lives, and they're actually the ones that care about it a lot. So if you think about it, they're dedicating their life's work to whatever this product is that you're designing for, whether you're trying to get the word out through marketing, whether your work is the actual product. Maybe it's an invention, maybe it's a digital, an AR tool that they invented for a certain field like medical or something, and they're passionate about this. We need to make sure that we mine that passion, because it's found inside them. And we need to make sure that when we're dealing with our stakeholders, that we have not just, this reverence like, oh, they pay my salary and stuff like that, but we need to make sure that we actually are treating them like the little pot of gold that they are, when it comes to design and what we're trying to do. So like the stakeholder, the user has things that they're holding too. So I believe that the user is holding the pain, they're holding the desire, and they're holding the quest. All of these three things are found in the heart of the user. The pain points of using this product or this company's services, it's found in the heart of the user. The desire to actually use this, whatever it may be. Maybe they need to get diabetic medicine and they're trying to figure out how to order that online. They have the desire. Sometimes that desire leads to pain when that system is not working right. It's not designed well. So they have the pain, they have the desire, and they have the quest. They're out searching for somebody who can satisfy what they've been looking for. And I'd love to say this too, that a lot of times, especially here in America, we've been taught, we're supposed to be after the pursuit of happiness. So even just phrases like that come from our founding fathers, they put people on this quest of trying to find things. These companies that we work for are creating the things that people are trying to find. So we go to the user to find what are the pain points, what are the desires, and what are you looking for. And, you know, when we begin to merge these things, we start to get crazy cool results. But just remember, just because we're customer obsessed doesn't mean that we don't care about stakeholders, because again, they hold the key to Ethereal UX. Stakeholders, we should get to know them as people. So everybody we're talking to, this means as much as you can, straight up LinkedIn. I mean, I'm stalking people to the core. Like as much as I can find out about these people, do they have a dachshund? Do they have a little wiener dog like me? Do they like cats? You know, what's their favorite color? As much as I could get to know, we need to get to know their business like the back of our hands. And this comes through discovery, you know, all of this real practical things we could talk hours about, but we need to understand their business. And this means even things like if there's, you know, we work for global clients, and sometimes say maybe the client side in the US and the client side in the UK are kind of at odds and they fight about everything. We need to know things like this, especially getting into these relationships, because some of those fights and things are things that we're going to have to solve. And we also need to get to know our stakeholders' ways of working like the back of our hand. Because, see, when we see a company's way of working, this is actually a clue to how we're going to be able to provide the service or the product to their users. Because one of the things when we get into UX is that we don't want to do is we don't want to create headaches for people that are actually working and creating a base for all of the products that we're helping them build. So I'll try to move a little faster. I'm almost done, but this is a person, and I put this in here. This is a stakeholder, and I don't know if any of you have ever got the like side eye or the like weird lowered glasses. What the heck are you talking about, man? When you're presenting something to this maybe like CEO or something like that. And I just want to say that our stakeholders are people. They're just people. They have a job to do. They may or may not be passionate about it. We hope they are. But what I want to say right now is don't be afraid. Just be real. You did great work that you're showing or you're asking questions, and listen. Because listening, you're going to be able to find the heartbeat of what this person is trying to sell, what they're trying to produce, and you're going to be able to figure out how to merge those. So this was one of the slides I showed just kind of as an example of a time. The client we were working with for Samsung here was very cool. Like, there was no problems. It was almost too cool. We needed to get pushed. But one of the things that went down is that just as a designer, I was getting hung up on how to make this little AR experience seamless with the actual features that they were trying to show. And we got really, really hung up on certain things. Like, one of the things is that we were told that the fridge was going to be the hub of the home, and everything that we did was going to come off of the fridge. Now, I'm saying that you don't know. This fridge that you're looking at is a smart fridge. You might have heard of Samsung smart fridge. But what we came to is this idea that, no, the fridge isn't the main character. The actual phone are still our connected piece to all of our smart devices. And so we started kind of thinking about, we need this to be some kind of iPad app. We need it to be some kind of phone app so somebody could walk into the store and scan a QR and use this. But all of these findings really came out between this kind of, not an argument, but just this back and forth with our stakeholder, really getting to the point of, we need this to be super simple. So when there's kind of heated things and we're not coming up with the right flows in the answer, we need to not be afraid, we need to be real, and we need to listen. And we will get a lot of information. This is that ethereal goodness that does not have to do with, boxes. It just has to do with what needs to happen to make these products come to life. So kind of like stakeholders, being in tune with our stakeholder does not mean
that we do whatever they want, or that we stop advocating for customers. That's our job. We are in charge of making sure that the user experience is great. So we need to get to know who the users are and what makes them tick. We need to know their limbic triggers. This is a whole nother talk I like to do about limbic design, and we need to obviously get to know their pain points and other things. So here's some users. These are also people. Binoodha was talking about going out, and it was fun with that AR experience for Samsung. We actually got to go around and test it in different places. It's imperative that we see what people actually think about it, but it goes beyond just this, click-through experience. How do they feel? How does it make them feel when they use it? These are the things we're trying to actually uncover as ethereal UXers. So, and then kind of just to add to that, I really feel like it's usually pretty fun to find out what a user wants and what they need. User testing and, usability testing is really kind of great, in my opinion. It's one of the funnest things I do. Sometimes we get to travel to do it. Sometimes it's over the interwebs, but, we can find a lot out about users, and they're not really fighting us that much to give us the answers, and we have all these tools and tricks. But when it comes to really listening, I just want to drive home that the heart and passion comes from our stakeholders, and we really need to keep what they're saying in mind, and we really need to be able to move past any trepidation in talking to them and getting things out of them. So finally, or almost finally, Ethereal UX mines the space between the ask to marry the heart of a business with the desires of their customers. And this is where I say, like earth and sky meet, we kind of bring this ethereal thing back to life. So when we find the passion and when we find the drive behind this product and what it really needs to be in simplicity, then we merge all of that back with our design skills and creating actual boxes in this and, flows and things. So whether you're a beginner designer or a seasoned vet, I hope you will begin to explore ways to add ethereal UX into your day-to-day practice. And that's all I have to say about that for now, but open to questions or anything like that.
Great, thank you very much, Britt.
Yeah.
It really kind of, that was a bigger, higher picture than I was expecting. But thanks for that. One thing that I just couldn't stop laughing when I saw the limbic triggers.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering what testing you're doing that's triggering either a fight or a flight response.
Well, I think that I'm pretty sure I haven't specifically worked on any products like that, but I think that we would consider those if we were doing social things. I think that in all limbic ways we're drawn, and people are drawn to fights. Just look at the comments, and I stay glued to comments because it's some of the funniest stuff you can see out there. But people are glued to they're glued to fights. They're glued to all of it. So,
one question that came to mind with your Samsung example there. What if your stakeholder was the fridge guy? And so therefore, if you're thinking about your stakeholder and their needs, well, he's the fridge guy. Mm-hmm. And so he wants the fridge to be the hub of everything. Mm-hmm. So what do you do when your research starts showing you that, maybe it shouldn't be, but that person is invested, your stakeholder is invested?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that obviously it starts with just saying it, and it sparks a conversation, and we love to lead into research, so if we start seeing something that doesn't jive with the overall scheme of, and I mean, something like that was not just some random guy saying it's the fridge. This was like a whole decision made by, a company. And so we start challenging that, and we start we start looking into, phone usage as like a remote control. And it's kind of incredible, but COVID really brought that to life even more for us. We know how glued to phones we are, But then people trying to avoid touching things really brought that to life. And we had research already from our team to say this is really like where we need to start heading, and this might not be the wisest decision for you, So.
Great. Well, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts. We're just out of time. Apologies for the technical difficulties at the start, but thank you for sharing all your thoughts on Ethereal UX.
Thanks a lot, man, for having me.
Thank you. So that brings us to the end now. I hope you enjoyed our session, our online session today. If you did enjoy it, that was just a taster of what we get up to at our events in USA and in EMEA. So we're hosting our USA event in May. If you'd like to come along, it's going to be a lot more speakers, multiple days. You get to mingle around with over 500 people physically, and then more people will be joining us online. So if that's interesting to you and you're in product, UX, design, or dev, then please do come along and join us. And yeah, tickets early bird sale is on right now. So get your early bird ticket and use up that 2022 budget. So thank you very much. Thanks once again to Binoodha and to Britt for sharing your insights today, and looking forward to catching you again. Thank you.